Dr. Parikh?
Yeah.
Did you hear that introduction?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I will start over. I'm sorry, we have a mute issue. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today. We have Dr. Sagar Parikh, who is a professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto, where he has been director of continuing mental education and head of general psychiatry. At Toronto's major hospital grouping, he currently serves as the president of the Medical Staff Association. He serves as secretary of the International Society for Affective Disorders and head section of Affective Disorders, World Pediatric Association. Dr. Parikh is the author, editor of and over 140 reviewed articles and book chapters, and co-author of CANMAT, Treatment Guidelines for Depression and for Bipolar Disorder. As medical director of Mindfulness, he helped create a novel internet system for recognition and management of mental disorders. Today, Dr. Sagar will guide you to determining website credibility. He will provide sites that include self-monitoring tools with explanation of the tool offered, as well as how to use free internet BT tools to improve your symptoms. Good morning and welcome.
Hello, everybody. Good morning to the people on the West Coast and good afternoon to people on the East Coast. And if you're listening at a later time in the middle of the night, you should be sleeping. At any rate, welcome to this talk called Better Health Through eHealth, Practical Internet Tools for Mood and Anxiety Disorders. I'm Sagar Parikh from the University of Toronto. So you've heard a little bit about the learning objectives. What we're going to cover are tips on ways to know if a website has credibility, what sorts of questions you should be asking before you decide to use a particular program or approach. We will have the opportunity to look at some key sites. We're going to list some sites, and one or two sites we're going to go into some detail on. And finally, we're going to look at what is the most effective evidence-based treatment in psychiatry, and that is cognitive behavior therapy, and specifically look at some internet sites that are free and that provide this in a way that's already been tested in studies with the actual website. So what is eHealth? eHealth is a loosely defined term, and it includes just about everything that you could think of that somehow has computers and the internet and things like that involved. And so there's no one who legislates this term, and so not everyone is familiar with the term. But what I mean by this term is simply anything that is either internet or computer-based or both involves eHealth. And that'll include things like applications on smartphones or on tablets, apps. The whole thing is under the broad umbrella of eHealth. Now, when we think about the ways in which eHealth is used, there are a number of ways to think about just how common it is. And I guess the first thing is that the majority of people on the internet who may do online shopping or just, look for vacations also look for health information. So the majority of us already look for health information on the internet. So we're already, whether we knew it or not, practicing eHealth. And some of us actually go into greater depth. We look at the evaluations of healthcare institutions. Obviously, we look at what sort of services they might provide. And there are a number of websites that rate institutions and healthcare providers. A lot of those are rather dubious in the way they operate, these evaluations. But nonetheless, we use them to get some idea of institutions and healthcare providers. Now, we talked about the span of eHealth, and I just wanted to emphasize again that this includes things like looking up information, getting resources online. It involves just looking at websites that provide facts. It involves looking at websites that might have an interactive component where you actually do a program. And, of course, social media, things like Facebook and Twitter. And finally, mobile applications, which now cleverly is being called mHealth, the M for mobile. So eHealth encompasses all of that. And here's a slide that I want to spend a little bit of time at because it's really the heart of the credibility issue. So the first thing is, we're used to looking at internet sites and saying, wow, that's a well-designed site. It looks beautiful. It seems very nice. I like the language or the pictures or the graphics. And unfortunately, that's not a very good guide to whether it's actually a good site from a healthcare perspective. I think we still have to go back to the basics when we're evaluating any kind of eHealth application and say, who is this? Who created it? Is it a credible institution? Does it come out of a hospital or university? If it's primarily from a person, can I look up this person and see what kind of credibility they have? Almost every website has a section where you can click who we are, and it's worthwhile spending some time looking at that before you decide, you know what, this is a site. Of course, if there are reviews of it, that could be of some help. But if we're talking about health, you want to know that there's actually been some kind of study, a research study. And this might be cited in the website itself. A good website might say, oh yeah, we've been studied and this is the way in which people have written about us. If we want to be very strict about it, we can go to another health site and do what is known as a PubMed search, searching the medical literature to see if there's any mention of this particular website or this approach. Those are the most important things. Who did the site, and have they actually tested it and used it, and has it been evaluated by anybody? Those are the most important sites. And if you want to think about it, isn't it what we would expect if we were taking a medication or a psychotherapy from a healthcare provider? We'd want to know that they're credentialed and qualified and so forth. Then there are other issues about the credibility and utility of a site. First of all, what does it cost? How is it accessed? How often can I use it? Are there any limits to it? Many things on the internet have tutorials, and they should have a way of explaining what are the best ways to use this site. So that's an important question to help us know whether this site is going to be workable for us or not. Another critical thing is, what is the purpose of our use of this site? Do we have a clinical problem that we might go to a live healthcare provider for, or is this a more subtle thing? Are we, trying to improve some aspect of our health, but it's a not an illness, but we're trying to maybe find a better way to do public speaking or improve our tennis serve or something like that, or lose weight a little bit more efficiently with some better exercises. Those are all important things, but they're not necessarily clinical applications. So if it's a clinical application, if we're dealing with serious depression, serious anxiety, or something like that, you want to make sure that it has credible people behind it. One of the other things that bears consideration is, where is the site hosted? And this is something that's often not easy to determine, and it's just something to be aware of. And the main reason is that some websites systematically collect information about you. So not only will they connect, your email address and how you connected and what country you're from, but some programs ask you, and you do this, because you want to write down, say, challenges in your life, symptoms that you're having, and so on. And so that, in essence, becomes health information. And it potentially is linked to you through your email address or through some other means. And depending on the country, it is possible that that website will then be open to inspection by the government of that website. So a prime example is in the United States, where all electronic data that is housed in computer servers in the United States is open to inspection by the U.S. government. And many countries have some version of that kind of legislation. So if you really want privacy, you may not want something that's on the internet. And finally, the more cosmetic things, does it look attractive? Do you need lots of additional software? These are practical concerns in choosing a website. So to summarize, the most important thing is, number one, the question, am I using it for a serious purpose, a clinical purpose, a serious disorder? And if so, can I have some information about who the person is that is behind it? Are they credible healthcare professionals? Are they credible healthcare institutions? And in an ideal world, are there any studies that actually show that this website or this program or this app actually works? Now, when we start to move to the specific types of internet applications, we can talk about internet-delivered psychotherapy, and there's a fair bit of it that I'm going to talk about today, and that's because these are psychotherapies that have already been tested in face-to-face applications and found to be quite helpful. And then, to some extent, they've been adapted to the internet, primarily through CBT. And so we'll talk about that and demonstrate the two particularly good sites for that near the end of today's presentation. There are other things that are still very helpful. There are self-help websites which just give you some practical advice on how to regulate your sleep and appetite and structure your day. There are a number of websites that include things on how to monitor your mood or other symptoms. Some that just provide disease information, like what are the treatments for this type of depression or that type of anxiety, and so on. So there are a variety of ways in which we can use information. By definition, most of what we're talking about relies on internet access. And this internet access, besides requiring a browser, may require one of the other programs that are listed here, but these are all standard computer programs. Some things you will get from the internet, but download either onto your computer or on your tablet or your phone, and then you won't necessarily need internet access on a continuous basis to use that program. So now let's go through some websites that are related to specific forms of psychotherapy. So cognitive behavior therapy is the most evidence-based treatment in medicine, actually. And here are some websites that I personally can testify to as being useful and fairly adherent to the principles of cognitive behavior therapy. And the very first one there, the Mood Gym, is by far and away the most tested, the most well-known, the most widely used, and we'll be going over that one in near the end of today's session. So the slide also shows, as do some of the next few slides, some websites are free, and those that have a cost have a asterisk or star after the name of the website. And I'm not listing all the web addresses here because, thanks to Google, you can search that as long as you have the name of the website. Now, IPT, or interpersonal therapy, is another major form of psychotherapy that's been well validated for the treatment of depression. Unfortunately, it's been difficult to adapt to the internet, and elements of it are found on the Mood Gym as well, and more specifically through a program there known as eCouch. And unfortunately, IPT still needs to develop as a web-delivered option. Here's an example of a study. This is a study published in a medical journal that just in the past year that new IPT and personal therapy site and compared it to a CBT site, the Mood Gym, which we talked about before, for adults with depression symptoms. So what happened in this study is that people who participated in the study were randomly assigned to two new treatments. One was the brand new IPT. The second is the Mood Gym, which is cognitive behavior therapy over the internet. And then there was a control or placebo condition. And this was conducted over a 4-week period. And basically this study showed that the cognitive behavior therapy site, the Mood, had a slight edge over the IPT site, but both of them actually were better than just getting the placebo condition. So that's an example of a study that helps us think, yes, this has actually been evaluated. Unfortunately, there are almost no such studies in the vast majority of internet things, with the exception of CBT. Now, apart from CBT and IPT, the third major useful psychotherapy for mood and anxiety disorders is not psychodynamic or psychoanalytic psychotherapy, but something called mindfulness. Mindfulness is a grandchild, if you will, of cognitive behavior therapy, married to elements of meditation, primarily drawn from the Indian Buddhist tradition of meditation. And this mixture of some elements of cognitive behavior therapy, some elements of Eastern philosophy and meditation has yielded a very helpful approach to deal with mood and anxiety problems, particularly in a preventive way. And by that I mean, if you've already struggled with depression and anxiety and you're better now and you want to prevent yourself from slipping the slope, mindful approaches are extremely helpful. If you're already at the bottom of the pit in a severe depression, mindfulness is not strong enough to pull you out. But to prevent you being stressed and you've never had it and you have a lot of stress, to deal with that stress, mindfulness is great. Or recovered from severe bout of depression or anxiety, want to stay well, mindfulness is great. And this is emerging now on the internet as well. And there are a few sites, and of those few, the most one that's been recently revamped is the one at the bottom, Headspace. And one has a free, and then it has a fee part. It's something that can be done on your computer or on your smartphone, and highly mentioned that in addition to delivering therapy, you can get other kinds of information on the internet. And so some of these resources involve better ways to track housing, and that's, could self-monitoring. And so if you look at the bullet there, there's start off in the daily challenge. So these are sites which help you track how you're doing. When we are worried about our physical health, we might get on a weigh scale and say, okay, this is my weight today. Or we might have a blood pressure cuff at home, and we monitor our blood pressure. You can also systematically monitor your mood or your anxiety, and you can do this with, pen and paper rating scales. It's often more handy and convenient to do it through something that's online. And so this self-monitoring resources can help you to do that. There are other resources that we'll be going into in a little bit more deep, and they're just listed here as a kind of reminder. So there are, in these places, lots of people come and chat about this topic. So it's a place for discussion. It's not necessarily a good place for specific treatment. It may be to get some advice. You can post and ask an issue and see how other people have an issue by contacting one of several forums, and I'll be going over this later today. And then there are some places which just provide more concrete information about what is depression, what is bipolar disorder, what is panic attack, and what are the treatments. And some of these do more, like Living Life to the Full, not only provides the information, but provides CBT, but you can use the website in capacity. If we look at different disorders, here are some of the tools that are already well developed based on the disorder. So on the left-hand side, for depression, there are sites for CBT. There's a little bit on IP, and there are a significant number of websites for assessment, self-monitoring, mindfulness, just general information on. And given that depression is the most common serious mental disorder, it's surprising that it's well developed on the internet as well. For anxiety, CBT is well developed, IPT a bit, And there are reasonable websites that help with assessment, self-monitoring, and providing basic education. Bipolar, although it's very trendy these days and you hear about it a lot in the media, is, comparatively a mature disorder, and so there's much less developed for that. There's a little bit on CBT, there's on self-monitoring, and there are a fair number that provide educational material on it. Let's look at the specific websites for depression. These are a mixture of some sites which provide therapy, some provide information, and sites provide both. Some sites provide more. So I'm actually presenting this information in a variety of ways. We're sometimes interested in looking at CBT, where's the CBT? Sometimes someone asks, well, what are the resources for depression? And then maybe a slide like this, cover the span between assessment, monitoring, education, and actual intervention. So similarly, go on to anxiety disorders. Here are a number of sites that make some treatment, probably information sites, and self-monitoring specific to a wide variety of anxiety disorders. Now, time does not permit to go through each and every anxiety disorder and related disorders. A lot of need specific information for OD or obsessive compulsive disorder and so on. That we don't have time to review today. Bipolar, as I mentioned, has relatively fewer sites. Far, best site is called Beating Bipolar, and there's an asterisk there that a fee is required. When the site was first created, it was created as one with a fee. More recently, they've dropped the fee in an effort to, encourage people to use it, and that may change again. I'm not sure at the time when you access it whether it'll have a fee or not, but if you want to know about bipolar and you want to learn some basic skills on how to cope with bipolar, Beating Bipolar is the website for that. It's housed in the UK. The next couple of slides resources for youth and parents and other special populations. I put them there as examples of well-regarded sources for information very specific context. So here, the information sites, they don't provide psychotherapy, they don't provide referral, anything like that. They do provide useful information. And since talk is recorded, you can also potentially come back to this talk, and if you have an interest in one of the sites, you can look at the slide. And these sites include resort caregivers, and they include ones that are particularly good, produced by patient organizations, particularly the Depression Bipolar Support Alliance and the Families for Depression Awareness, and of course the International Bipolar Foundation's site as well. And if we wanted to look for specific information based on particular excellence, I've specifically just chosen a few. These aren't necessarily the best, but four really solid sites. So the Dog Institute is an Australian research and educator in mood disorders, and it has all kinds of innovative programs, and so on. So if you want to hear a nice Australian accent, go to the Black Dog Institute. Out of British Columbia, Canada, the CREST BD network is a network that is producing all kinds of terrific stuff on self-management and wellness strategies in bipolar disorder, and probably is the single best resource for self-management strategies. And what's different about it is that it takes professional advice, but it has done a lot of research from individuals with bipolar disorder who are doing very well, and using them as the experts, combining that with traditional psychiatric expertise to say, what works and how would you use it. And there are a couple of results there for bipolar disorder listed too. And next slide, from the neck up, the middle bullet there. This is the single easiest site to use if you want to just answer a bunch of questions and say, I'm not feeling so well, but do I really meet criteria for a clinical problem? Is it severe enough that it probably diagnosed as something? Of course, a diagnosis can only be given by a care professional, but to have a good clue as to whether you meet the threshold having that checkup from the neck up is a particularly good site. Now, when we think about the internet, we're used to using just the web and looking up internet. In addition to providing information, they may have programs in there that are just like apps. Some of these are listed there, and these ones are made to help track your mood. So you would go to the website, you'd learn something, but you'd also use an interactive program to be able to data like your daily mood, and it would set and keep it for you, and so you can quickly pull it, kind of like a diary that says how you're on certain things. If you want certain programs that give you full psychotherapy, but just give you key of practice or information of meditation or relaxation exercises, they're shown at these two sites. We've covered a lot of webs. What about social media? Social media are dear friend Facebook, things like Twitter, blogs, and again, it's a time to go over this relatively quickly. The main purpose of media in healthcare is not. It's important to know that. Many websites, the sites that we've covered so far, do attempt to provide both information and provide some when they provide online CBT. Social media, by and large, are not developed yet. They're not well, and so I think where they're utilized is in combating isolation, but not in actually the disorder. That's an important caveat. When we're feeling well and curious about how our friends are doing, we can call Facebook and just keep in touch. When someone's feeling depressed, anxious, there's always a tendency to withdraw, avoid contact, and again, Facebook will help counteract that. One of the newer trends that is just very slightly being investigated is, does it make sense for you to connect not just with your friends, but possibly with a psychiatrist? Most of the guys are not on Facebook for privacy reasons. They want to, draw a line between their life and their professional work, so they're choosing not to be on Facebook. But there may be a subset of psychiatrists, and certainly some who are studying it, who are looking at, if I offer some connection, not as a complete alternative to face-to-face therapy, but as a add-on to what I do via Facebook, will that be useful? So just a few months ago, there was actually a publication on this, and this author looked at what happened when you had this Facebook connection. So he took 60 patients who were already in treatment for severe depression and divided them into three different categories. One was the control or placebo condition. One, they could say that the psychiatrist was their friend, and that means that as they put something on Facebook, their friend could read it and maybe comment on it. And another just had a Facebook group, but there was no psychiatrist who was officially of that group. And by being on Facebook, both groups who were on Facebook felt that they were doing better and had fewer symptoms of depression. And did the best, ones who actually had a group, was a psychiatrist who was a friend, providing detailed psychotherapy, maybe answering a few questions and providing some encouragement. Now, in addition to the group on Facebook, Facebook is now rapidly developing, and has had for a while, applications. Applications are just like apps on a smartphone. They're specific programs, things you're on Facebook, and some related to bipolar, and the first two are there. Bipolar, and the last one is an app that leads you through a series of questions, check if you're depressed and how severely depressed you might be. So that's a monitoring function that Facebook is trying to explore. Those previous sites, let me go back, those previous sites have not really been tested yet, the validity. They're just, here's a tool, see if you like it. And if you did that, I think that's reasonable. Separate from the self-assessment part is the communication part. And this is where, combating isolation and having someone to chat to without getting specific psychotherapy is useful. And this is what Facebook really excels at. And so there are a number of groups, some professional organizations, which offer a chance to discuss things within the group. As you can imagine, these groups have advantages and disadvantages. Somebody can post something that's very disturbing or very obnoxious or obscene, and so it's important to have some degree of a moderator or someone who's going to look it over. Most sites don't have that, but they do have, users reporting that, something was inappropriate, and then a message is sent back to the person who hosts that, and they're able to, and after some delay, maybe remove that comment. The other issue for many people is it's great to share, but then how much privacy do you have? And so that, again, is a personal decision about what do you reveal, what do you want revealed by participating in such discussion online. Now, outside of Facebook, there are a number of places where people discuss things. And it's the same principle as Facebook groups. You join a group, you're on a website, you join a group, and you post comments. You can read people's previous comments and so on. And the same caveats are there. It's not always moderated. In fact, the majority of the sites are not moderated. So people can leave hurtful or obnoxious or incorrect statements on there. And sometimes they're removed and sometimes they're not. But at least it's a nice opportunity to hear a conversation about certain things and perhaps answer or ask some questions. One of the most popular places for these kinds of discussion groups is the website known as Reddit. And Reddit has a number of smaller sections which are devoted specifically to the discussions of the different disorders. So for anxiety, there's one, depression, there's one, bipolar, there's one, and so on. And you see them listed here on this slide. Here are some additional links, not from Reddit, but from other sites where we have good discussion groups. And the reason these ones are listed, these tend to be more credible sites. They tend to have a higher degree of moderation. So in general, you'll find more comfort from picking these sites who want to join an online discussion about your anxiety subject. We've covered a lot of ground. We've covered eHealth, we've covered internet sites, and we've covered some social media, primarily focusing on Facebook and on internet forums. What about using your phone? And this is what people are using. Well, because it's new, there's actually very little to say about it. So apps on your phone or on a tablet would fall into this new phrase where M is for mobile, meaning your mobile phone. And what to say about the art in health? Well, the apps that are there, advantage that they have is that although you download them from the internet, often they work entirely on your phone, and so they don't necessarily need an immediate ongoing net connection. They may use that feature as well, so you can both use the app on your phone while it's getting some additional information or resources for you from the internet. So there is some flexibility there, and nothing the flexibility of having phone with you where you go. The mobility aspect is price. We don't have an opportunity to go further into ehealth because there's virtually no studies that show that any particular app on your phone actually works. That's shocking because we know hundreds of thousands of apps in the iTunes store and in the Android store and so on. But if we look at it from a traditional evidence-based medicine perspective, are there good studies that using this app or that app actually is helpful, is good, or even that the app actually does what it's supposed to? Sure, there are a few studies, and we don't have time to go over that today. I think the line is there are no significant studies of any major app that shows that this is wonderful. I'm not saying all apps are bad. I'm just saying the evidence is there yet. Yes, it's an app that's been tested in randomized controlled trials and showed that this worked well. So use the apps because they're convenient. Use the app for monitoring your mood. Maybe the apps to get a taste of some of the exercises that they might put you through. But if you really want something more reliable and believable, just see the app and then go to one of the websites that we have already covered to look at what works. Now, I've emphasized what works in evidence-based medicine, and what we use in evidence-based medicine is a guideline or a treatment guideline to tell us what's really good. And among the most widely used guidelines in the world, I'm pleased to say, are the Canadian Network for Mood and Anxiety clinical guidelines, both for depression and a separate one for bipolar disorder. And it's a series of articles of what are the good treatments for each of those conditions, and includes both medications and psychotherapy and brain stimulation and other techniques. Those guidelines, by the way, are freely available for download at the CANMAT website. So if you just do www.canmat.ca, you'll get there. So within that, those guidelines, there's an article specifically about psychotherapy for depression and whether it's psychotherapy alone in combination with medication. And in those guidelines, only two were found to be extremely and reliably tested for the treatment of acute depression, right when you're in the severe depression. And those are CBT and IPT, and that's why we talked about that a little bit at the beginning. In this review, we also found evidence, good evidence, that there are a number of interventions, and we specifically listed that computer-assisted CBT has been fairly well tested and, certainly meriting a second line, which means pretty good, but not 100% as good as first-line treatment. So with that in mind, let's look at computer-assisted CBT as the one that's the most developed. There are two websites that I would say, without hesitation, are the two best websites that are free, that are easy to use, and reliably teach CBT, and that have been tested in randomized control trials. So they've been tested the same way face-to-face psychotherapy is tested, and in the same way antidepressant medication is tested. So depressed people are assigned to these sites. They're given either random assignment to the site or a control condition. That they're followed typically weekly for 8 weeks or 12 weeks, and their outcomes are evaluated, and they're asked questions about how they site, and finally a decision is made. Yes, this site was good. So the two sites I recommend are the Mood Gym, which is out of Australia, and Living Life to the Full, out of the United Kingdom. It's out of Scotland, and I guess the recent vote, Scotland is still part of the United Kingdom, so still say it's from the UK. Now, here is the home page of the Mood Gym, and you can see it doesn't look so. Why is this? It's because this was one of the first out of a university. So some very professors who were great at PT and great at psychology and psychiatry, but who are not web designers and don't have a graphic arts background, designed this homepage. Nonetheless, once you get past this homepage, it has been made very beautiful and interactive and fun. And just cut off on the bottom of this slide is some fireworks near the bottom, and it has over, I think at this point, over 600,000 people use this site. So what does the Mood Gym have? So first of all, what is it? It's a free interactive program designed to give you CBT tools to deal with symptoms primarily of depression, but also of anxiety. And this is taken directly from the site. You look at the third bullet. From Mood Gym, you'll learn how to problem solve, how to improve your self-esteem, how to improve the pleasure in life and cope with realistic stressors. And if you think about self-help books in general, Mind Over Mood is a very popular and very good CBT self-help book. This is like that, only it's interactive, online, and more engaging. This is what it consists of. The typical scenario is that you go through 8 modules. It's like signing up for an online course. Each module is between 30 and 45 minutes. You can, take it whenever you want. You do half it and then come back to it later. You fill out some quizzes that just are assessing how your mood is, but you're also doing some exercises that are part of cognitive behavior therapy. So this is excellent stuff. And the other site is Live Life to the Full. Here's the home page. It's a newer site, and hence the pages are attractive. They've got the message about the design site of the Mood Gym. And so they've done a much better job of designing something that's pretty good. And what's in this website? Well, some of the specific topic areas that are covered. You can see there's problem thinking, there's changing your thinking, that's noticing full thoughts and changing them, and then some wellness routines, sleep, do food, diet, and exercise, and so on. All of these are incorporated in a systematic way in both the gym and in Living Life Full in its consistent cognitive behavior therapy, and in a way that is done in regular, say, face-to-face cognitive behavior therapy. 2, you quizzes that check how your symptoms are. This is an example of a fictitious patient having up and down their anxiety score on the top and up and down with their depression score on the bottom. Now, of course, in real life, what you would hope to see is that they started off high and became much less depressed, so you wouldn't see an up and down pattern. It would worry me if my patients had this kind of pattern. But it's just here to illustrate what kinds of numbers you would see, what kind of pictures you would see about your own symptoms. And if you were logging in for the 4th time, you'd say, how am I doing? And how was I last week and 2 weeks ago? You'd get a picture like this. One of the unique things about Living Life to the Full is there's at here a public access, which is where everyone logs in, but there's also at the bottom point number practitioner access. So in the public access, you sign up, and there are different areas. There's an area where you can find information. There's an area where you can do your homework. There's an area where you monitor your. But what's unique about this site is that it invite a support practitioner. In other words, if you're already working doctor, rather than taking home, or rather taking to the clinic some worksheet that you did of your negative, you can do it online and invite your doctor to sign up, and then they can look at what you saved, your worksheet, and so on. So that's something neat from Living Life to the Full. Well, we're coming to the final slide here on eHealth. And I really want to conclude by reminding you there's a lot of help that's available through eHealth. Out of all that help, cognitive behavior therapy and IPT are still the best psychotherapies from base interventions, and CBT in particular has been very well studied for interventions. And so the two sites that we just reviewed are particularly good ways to use them. Like anything, we need encouragement and coaching and reminders to go and use these sites, and that's one of the key roles of the live clinician. So hopefully if someone's having a serious disorder, they're seeing a clinician, but they're using one of these sites add-on. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to the moderator for questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Parikh. Again, feel free to get to your control panel and send us any questions that you may have about this question today. So I will wait just, sometimes it takes a minute for people to type that in. So hey, with the silence, right with you. Okay, a couple of questions. The first question, is there a website or are there paper downloadable copies of your all of your resources from your talk?
I haven't written this up yet as a paper, although I'm working on it. I think that once the International Bipolar Foundation has posted this talk, I imagine that people will be able to pause a slide wherever there's a slide that displays a website, and then you can just look it up from that.
Yes, that's great. Thank you very much. The next question, do any of the sites with tracking capability also offer medication recording charts?
All medication charts are part of the charting, so several of them do. And so, yes, you can get that there, and, you know, you would write it down. But they're not formatted in any particular way, pre-populated with choice. I mean, but, yeah, some of them have. But I would say they already don't. Some do.
Great. Thank you. Next question. The excellent review of resources available. Thank you very much. Appreciate the importance of research-supported sites. So seriously, thank you. Let's see. Next question. Accessing recorded webinar. When will be posted on ibpf.org website under archive presentations. Any additional questions? Well, Dr. Parikh, like you've covered everything, and again, if you think of something after the fact, please send it to my email, dbrown@ibpf.org, and I'd be happy to send that to Dr. Parikh to answer. And thank you so much for your insight and important information today, Dr. Parikh.
Thanks, everyone, for and good day.